Hey guys, Cher here, and we're gonna talk about the most romantic couples of Disney. Trust me, almost every single film Disney has ever made has one. And like how I mentioned in the top 13 most romantic Disney songs, they're there for a reason. These couples are a staple in film today, so I would be completely amiss to not do a list for the month of Valentine's. So let's get started on the top 13 most romantic Disney couples. Woody and Bo Peep from the Toy Story franchise. We have a sequel coming up about these two, or I guess it's more of a prequel, really. They deserve to be on this list anyway. Woody is basically the one in charge of Andy's playroom of toys, as we saw in the past three films. And then we have Bo Peep, who's one of the people who basically follows his orders of sorts, but you can tell these two are very, very, very smitten for each other. I think a lot of those questions are going to be answered in the prequel, but sometimes I think that the prequel probably would not be necessary because these two work together so well because Bo Peep is basically the person who keeps Woody grounded. She's the one who's always telling him that things are going to turn out all right in the end and that Woody should stay himself instead of letting his emotions take control on a lot of things. And of course, Woody listens to her because, of course, from what we see in movies 1 and 2, he's so head over heels for her that they're basically already a married couple. Though I don't think marriage in toys exists to begin with, they're basically a married couple in the movies anyway. And I was very, very, very sad when I found out that Bo Peep was not in the third movie. We don't know much about what's happened, but it's kind of obvious that these two were separated. But anyway, it's because these two basically work off each other so well that Woody needs Bo in order to stay emotionally grounded of things so he can keep his logical self together. And of course, Woody treats himself such a gentleman to Bo Peep that of course she stays. Lady and Tramp from Lady and the Tramp. Lady and the Tramp is a completely different type of love story, and for Disney, it's definitely one of its kind. I say that because Lady and Tramp's relationship is more realistic in a relationship than others we've seen in other films. Usually the Disney formula is guy and girl meet, it's love at first sight, and then something separates them, whether it's a magical thing or something else, and then when they reunite, they fall in love again and they get married. That's usually the formula to many of our Disney classic films, in a sense. Lady and the Tramp is different because Lady is your well-off, pampered, special child, basically, of a dog because she's been raised in this very nice, cozy lifestyle and she had nothing to worry about for the longest time. That is until her owners end up having a child, and of course they have to go away on some trip, and then of course a stranger that Lady doesn't know about comes in, and basically this stranger does not like dogs, and she basically disregards Lady as a rat more than anything else. But then you have Tramp, who's been basically living on the streets, from what we know, his entire life, and from what we've figured out later on in the movie, he's been around. We don't know how old this dog is because they're, dogs, they have a different lifespan or growing cycle than humans do. But Tramp, because he's a street dog, Tramp has been around. and he hasn't had a place to call home. And of course, when Lady and Tramp meet, it's not a love at first sight meeting. It's basically Tramp telling her that she's going to get replaced with a child eventually, and then he just up and leaves. That's legit how the scene happens. And then they meet again when Lady ends up running away from Jim Deere's aunt, who basically comes in, takes care of everything, who ends up hating Lady because she doesn't, like I said, she doesn't like dogs. She likes cats, and the cats end up getting Lady in trouble. So of course, Lady runs away. Tramp ends up saving her because Tramp knows the streets better than she does, and he's willing to help her out. And of course, they get to know each other a little bit because of this timeline of events of what happens when Lady's away from home. So of course they have time to actually build some connection. And that does happen. And of course by the end of the movie, there's that stereotypical misunderstanding type of plot device, like, why is it that in romance movies there has to be some stupid misunderstanding? But for this movie it kind of works, because Lady learns about Tramp's past, and it kind of ticks her off. In the climax of the film, Tramp doesn't, give up all hope and just walk away. When he hears that Lady is in trouble, he goes right after her. That is how much you know he cares for her. He came to her, and he did anything and everything he could to not only protect her, but protect her master's son. And that is the type of character that we admire. And of course, in the end, the two do end up together because Tramp did a very heroic thing, and then Lady recognizes that, and of course, it's just meant to be. And of course, what is the top layer of the cake of this relationship here is, don't tell me you never did this before. Tarzan and Jane from the Tarzan franchise. Tarzan and Jane's relationship is also a different type of relationship, but it's almost similar to our basic fall in love at first sight trope, but it also mixes elements from Lady and the Tramp's relationship. But of course, because of the setting and because of the circumstances, they're done extremely differently. So of course in the movie, you all know that Jane ends up getting chased by a group of baboons over a misunderstanding, and then, of course, Tarzan comes and saves her because it's his first time ever seeing a human like him before, and of course, when he sees someone in trouble, he has to go rescue that person who's in trouble. And at first, Jane is scared of him because when going to Africa, the last thing you'd expect is a jungle man raised by apes rescuing you from certain danger. I mean, you'd be extremely happy about it, but that would be the last thing yet that you'd ever expect. But of course, she comes to learn that Tarzan's actually nice and gentle, and he wants to get to know her rather than trying to harm her. Because, of course, that's Tarzan's personality, and of course, Tarzan's goal is trying to understand what humans are like, because basically humans are his original species, and he's trying to find out where he came from. And of course, throughout the whole movie, that's what Tarzan and Jane do. Jane teaches Tarzan the ways of humans, and Tarzan shows Jane around because he knows Jane wants to explore the jungle, and she wants to know more about gorillas because she's with her father on this exploration, doing research and such. These two work because Jane is not your so typical heroine of sorts, or damsel in distress, or both. Because she was a damsel in distress, but she's not your basic, 1940s cartoon damsel in distress. Because basic women of the time period, which in this case was late 1800s, because that was when the book was written, I think, women themselves don't usually go out and do things, because that's usually what men do. But of course, in the case of this movie, Jane is super intelligent. She does some of the handiwork because it's her father, and Clayton, basically their bodyguard of sorts. She does a lot of teaching, she knows a lot of knowledge, she of course helps her father with her research. So of course that's what Tarzan finds interesting in Jane, because she knows so much of things. I mean, of course she's absolutely beautiful, probably one of the most beautiful Disney women characters Disney's ever created, but that's not why Tarzan is so attracted to her. It's her mystery, it's her knowledge, it's the fact that she can tell him what he needs to know, but it's also how positively she reacts to things that she's never seen before. Like, she's out in this jungle, like, for a basic woman back in the time period, you'd probably think that Jane would be always scared of everything, but she's not scared of everything. She's scared of the appropriate things that she has to be scared of, especially when Kerchak threatens her for the first time. But when it comes to learning about other things, like exploring the jungle when Tarzan's around, like, you don't see her cowering behind him. You see her either next to him or in front of him, and when she discovers something new, she's completely in awe. And we don't really see that a lot in female characters, especially since this movie came out in 1999. These characters are such an interesting dynamic, especially when you have one character who grew up in one situation and another character that grew up in another, but somehow they connect because they have very similar personalities and they both have the same level of curiosities. And it's their teachings to each other, especially even in the TV series where I used to watch as a kid as well. They have nothing bad to say about each other. Like, everything they say about each other is absolutely positive. They're just that much in love with each other that they can accept one's living situation and another's upbringing situation. And that's what's so adoring about these two. Chicken Little and Abby from Chicken Little. I'm probably gonna get a lot of crap by talking about these two because they come out of what's considered to be one of Disney's worst movies, but please bear with me. Chicken Little and Abby are a very interesting demographic because in the case of the film, they are both considered outcasts, but of course they find comfort within each other because they understand each other's scenarios. Because Abby's nickname is the Ugly Duckling, even though she's not that ugly in particular. In fact, if we're gonna, like, put these characters in human form, she looks like the average girl. But of course, I understand what the demographic of the film is coming from. So when Abby looks average, everyone else is supposed to be looking, like, more attractive. Because, hey, you know, junior high, middle school, high school, that's when everyone, like, becomes super bitchy. Trust me, I know. And then, of course, you get Chicken Little, who's outcasted because of a whole entire clusterfuck of situations that should never have went down the way they went down. But, of course, Abby sees through that. And the best thing that she tries to do is to help him reconcile with those situations. Like, her scenario basically is, look, you just basically have to talk to your father. You have to speak up for yourself. Like, you are a bigger person than your size. Get it? Because Chicken Little, little chicken, huh? So, of course, because these two grew up or they're being raised in a similar circumstance of them not being popular because they're quote-unquote different from society, whether it's physical appearance versus mental stability, I suppose, because that's how this movie is treating, like, Chicken Little's falling from the sky scenario. These two stand out for each other. Like, you knew, like, these two liked each other straight from the get-go, because you saw, like, Abby's not-so-subtle, like, crush sign when she's calling Chicken Little cute, and he thinks he hears it, but then she tries to, like, pretend that it didn't happen. But then, in, like, the immediate next couple of seconds, you see her getting bullied by her other classmates, and Chicken Little actually stands up for her. Because not only is Abby his friend, but she's a person that he really cares about. And when he sees a person that he cares about getting tortured, he doesn't care about his size at all at that moment. He's going to stand up for them no matter what. And that is what's really heroic about Chicken Little himself, and I think he's one of the best main characters I can think of, even though the movie did not get that much credit either. And as I said before, Abby also does her best in trying to help him out because of that one scene I talked about earlier, like a couple seconds earlier. He's done a lot for her, so she needs to do something for him, or she feels compelled to do something for him in return, especially when she's helping him out with the baseball team. And of course, like I said earlier, she's like, you have to talk to your dad. It's the only way you know how. And of course, eventually, Chicken Little does take Abby's advice, because he knows in his own heart that despite what he tries to do, especially like, no, me getting popular is the only way that I can get my reputation back, he knows, like, especially in very dire circumstances, like towards the end of the film, the only way that anything is going to get solved is he actually stands up for himself. And when he stands up for himself and sees how the result turned out, and it was a good result, he was like, I can't believe this, and he cherishes Abby for that advice. It's not like he completely disregarded her and he thought this up on his own. No, Abby's words kept reminding him. What these two do for each other, it just makes my heart beat rapidly every single time. Like, I don't care if you don't like this movie or not, but you gotta admit, these two were perfect for each other. Like, no doubt about it. Simba and Nala from The Lion King. These two are definitely a childhood friends turn lovers story done right. Before the huge incident happens in this film, Simba and Nala are very close friends in their pride. And of course, when Zazu tells them that they're gonna end up getting married someday, of course as kids, they're not gonna believe it because they're too young for that stuff. For the whole, like, lovey-dovey stuff. Like, they're completely grossed out about it. But of course, when Nala ends up being told by Scar that Simba died during the wildebeest stampede, she's completely heartbroken. Like, she thought she lost one of her best friends in the world. And for a very long time, she had to suffer with that pain. So, of course, when Nala reunites with Simba in the desert oasis, when she finally finds him again and finds out that he was actually alive, of course she's overjoyed. And when Simba finally sees his best friend for the first time in forever, he's super delighted. It's like almost nothing has ever happened. Like, they just found each other again and they're like so happy to see each other because, of course, they were best friends. But they also work as a couple, and you know this building up because, of course, as Zazu said, they do end up together because Nala ends up saying to Simba, for years, or for a long time, I thought you were dead, and it broke me. Like, you have no idea, like, what that means. Like, did you have any idea what that meant when you disappeared like that? And, of course, Simba tries to console her, telling her, hey, I'm still alive, I'm right here, like, everything can just go back to normal. But, of course, Nala has to end up telling him, no, everything's not normal, because ever since Scar took control of the Pride Lands, everything had been basically going down the crapper. Because Scar took everything and basically destroyed what Mufasa tried to build. And even though Simba didn't want to face his past again, especially with what lies he'd been told as a child, like, Nala's pushing and reminder that, yeah, she's basically from Simba's past. She has to bring him back down to Earth. Like, of course she would be the person to come back down to Earth. I mean, it could have been Simba's mother. Of course, Simba's mom had no idea that her son was even alive. Like, basically, when what Scar told them about the stampede, it was all lies. Like, they had no idea it was Scar's idea to, like, take control of the kingdom in the first place by his own force. Of course, Nala, being younger person to venture out and try to find help for a kingdom that's in dire peril, it's absolutely fitting for her to do so, especially when she comes across the very person who she cared about ever since she was a child. And then, of course, when Simba finally comes to his senses, like, instead of treating her, like, pushing her away, he finally accepts her. And he's like, and he tries to be, like, the man of things, and he's like, oh, you better be careful for the danger. But Nala, of course, being the female of the situation, and if you don't know anything about lions, it's usually the females who do everything. Like, Nala's like, oh, I'll be fine. Like, I just gotta make sure you stay out of trouble. That also relates to their childhood dynamic. Because Simba was going to be the next king after Mufasa, he thought he was large and in charge. But, of course, with Simba gone for many years, Nala became the one who was basically large and in charge of their friendship. What becomes of their relationship is they do end up finding the truth of the situation. They work together to take back their kingdom, and Simba learns that Nala was basically right and that he should step up and take his father's place. And of course, with help from Rafiki, of course, he finds himself again, and he's going to take charge, and of course the right person to be on his side when taking charge of this new kingdom of his is Nala. It just makes downright sense. Pocahontas and John Smith from Pocahontas. First of all, I don't care about the sequel to this movie. Like, I know this story is a classic Romeo and Juliet scenario because you have Pocahontas, who's the princess of her father's tribe, and she's gonna be next in line to take control of it. And then, of course, you have John Smith, who's white as bread, and of course, even though John Smith is one of the more rational people and doesn't want to, but it's because of what group he's in and whose role he's under, he basically doesn't have a choice. But at the same time, he's one of the most open characters of this movie. Just as open as Pocahontas is to learning about new things, especially about these new people who've come to her tribe's territory in the first place. I think what really does it was their first meeting scene, which, of course, if you're a Disney fan like I am, you know that this is one of the most famous first meeting scenes basically in Disney film history. Like, it takes place at the waterfall, and John Smith thinks that he's being followed by an enemy Indian soldier. So, of course, he goes into hiding with his gun, and when he comes out, he realizes this is not a man who's following him, but a woman who is standing tall, so he is aware that she's a woman of power of sorts. Like, I think even though he probably did not have a clue that this is Pocahontas, the princess of her own tribe, but just by how Pocahontas stood, like, straight, John Smith knew this was not a woman to be reckoned with. And, of course, as a gentleman himself, he was going to respect that, no matter what the color of her skin was. He takes off his helmet as he approaches her because he wants to show her the respect that she deserved. And John Smith, out of his entire crew, coming to what this would be Jamestown, Virginia, is the most civil man to basically come in. And he is the one out of the many men in the group who Pocahontas wants to convince her father to talk to because he's the only man from that group who's talking some sense. And of course, if you guys have seen the 10th anniversary version, like if you have the DVD or not, I know I didn't because I didn't know this existed until like years later. Their song, If I Never Knew You, if you knew it that from the original movie's credits, it was actually supposed to be a scene in the movie, but of course, from the theatrical release, they had cut that scene because according to a test, when they showed this to children, they thought it was really boring. But when people finally saw the 10th anniversary edition, they're like, how come you didn't keep this scene in? Because it's one of the most beautiful scenes, beautiful songs in the entire movie. And it was because it completely expressed how John Smith was feeling when he spent his time with Pocahontas, and also Pocahontas on how out of this world of hate and fear, I managed to find one person to be the outlier of the thing that my tribe should be fearing and hating. And it's proof that there is still love in a scenario where it's hateful and dire. Because these two are very similar in their goals of finding peace, of course it makes sense for them to fall in love even though they don't officially get together, but they're still a couple. I mean, hey, if they shared a kiss in the film, they're a couple in my eyes. WALLE and Eve from WALL-E. Who knew that two characters who did not talk much would make one of the most adorable couples in Disney Pixar history? So in this movie, you have WALL-E, who's one of the last inhabitants of Earth in a very future setting. Because in this future, humanity have basically abandoned Earth because there's so much garbage piling up in it that it was basically toxic and uninhabitable. But then you have WALL-E who's trying to clean it up. Basically, still doing his job even though all the other WALL-E robots have basically worn out and were destroyed. But then you have Eve, who's a new technical robot whose mission was to find some source of life on Earth. Like, she is very paranoid, she's very, like, high sensory, like, she's one of those she was one of those robots, like, if you even made a false move, she will shoot you destroyed. And she almost did it to WALL-E a couple times because she had no idea that WALL-E was one of the only other living things on the planet. But these two do manage to work because you have uptight Eve who learns new things about having fun and being happy and also feeling other things besides doing your duty because of WALL-E, who has learned to adapt and also feel emotion. Especially watching that VHS tape of Hello Dolly. Oh my god, that is the nicest touch I have ever seen from a Disney Pixar flick. Because these two have learned to become different human beings from one another, and even though for WALL-E it was love at first sight, for Eve it wasn't. Because, like I said, she was so focused on her objective that she thought she did not have the time to feel anything for anyone else. But because WALL-E was the person who saw through her rough exterior, she realizes later on that WALL-E was the person who was for her. Because WALL-E sees the good in everybody, and when he knows something is bad, he knows something is bad, and he will defend those that he cares about, even sacrificing himself. Which, oh my god, like I said, I did not know I was going to feel sympathy for characters that I did not talk until I saw this movie when it first came out. And I think this was 2008, and in 2008 I was 13. So I think that was the proper age that I would feel sympathy for characters, and oh my god, I cried for these two. Like, I wanted these two to get together. I wanted these two to get together so bad. And at the end of the day, the two were just perfect. Like, I would be completely amiss if I didn't add these two onto the list. Carl and Ellie from Up. We only see these two for 5 minutes at the very least in this movie. For 5 minutes. But they turn out to be one of the most romantic couples in any movie whatsoever. And I'm gonna say it again. The first 5 minutes of this movie destroyed me. It destroyed my emotions. So basically, Ellie and Carl meet when they were kids, and of course they share the same thing that they've always loved. Adventure. They treated every single day that they were together as something new, and it felt like nothing was going to stop them. That is until one day at old age, Ellie's health failed her, and of course she ends up dying while Carl was basically finally trying to achieve their dreams of going to South America, as Ellie always wanted. And of course, this sticks with Carl for the rest of his life, because if there was anything he loved, even more than adventure itself, it was his beloved Ellie. You can tell that this man was dedicated to achieving her dream even after she moved on. Even after she passed on, he wanted to get to South America. He wanted to find that waterfall for her. Even, like I said, even after she passed, this man is so dedicated to his wife. Like, he could have moved on and done nothing for the rest of his life, because even of his old age, but he didn't. He didn't because he was always thinking about Ellie. And of course, Ellie was always thinking about him, because he finally goes into the scrapbook that he hadn't flipped into the other pages in a while, and he finds her message towards the end of the book where she had filled pictures of everything they've done past their childhood. Like when they got married, when they built their house for the first time, like their jobs, like she put everything in there, and it had nothing to do with South America whatsoever. And of course on the last page, it says, "Thanks to the adventure, go have a new one, Ellie." She knew what Carl always wanted, and she wasn't going to let herself stop him from doing what he wanted, but of course he didn't know that until sometime later. And it's that makes my heart almost burst. These two are just so perfect. I wish they could be at number one. Tiana and Naveen from The Princess and the Frog. Definitely these two characters were the first characters since Beauty and the Beast, I think, that actually took their time to finally get used to each other before they would end up falling in love. And yeah, I know this is another like fall in love in a day romance, so it's not like Beauty and the Beast, but how they managed to build that relationship is what makes this movie work. So you have Tiana, who's your average female citizen in New Orleans, who basically has a goal of owning her own restaurant because that was the dream that she built with her father. Her father, who ended up passing away in the war. And of course, ever since then, it only made Tiana's drive stronger to get that restaurant so that her father, even though that he's passed on, could still be proud of her. Like, she was a woman who wanted to make change. And even though there are people who try to stop her, she wasn't going to stop. You can tell she was not going to stop. And then you have Naveen, who is a prince of another country, but of course, he has the issue of he will not get his riches until he gets married. And of course, at this point, Naveen was like, I can just fall in love with any woman I want in America and she can take me because what woman doesn't want to be with a prince? But then it becomes more difficult when he ends up cursed by a con man and then ends up dragging Tiana into the curse with him. So of course, in order to find out how to turn themselves back to human, that means these two, who cannot stand each other, have to work together in order to complete their goals of turning back to normal. And along the way, these two start learning two completely different things, not about each other, but about themselves. Naveen ends up learning about himself that, yeah, he never had to do anything. Like, ever since he was a child, like, everyone did everything for him, and he never had to lift a finger in his life. And of course, with being with Tiana, he's like, yeah, now that I've not accomplished anything, I feel like my life is more boring than yours, because at least you're doing everything you could. And it seems like you're doing everything. I just want to feel like someone can be proud of me for once. For Naveen, even though, like, the beginning kind of made us want to hate him, it tugs at my heartstrings, because now I know that Naveen is actually a human being and not a piece of cardboard for once. And then, of course, you get Tiana, who's stubborn as a rock. Like, she would not budge for anybody in a while because, like I said, she grew up in a society where, basically, for women, it's hard to find success. a black woman, no less. It's even more difficult. So, of course, she's very stuck up. Her only drive was the restaurant for a while, but then she realizes, yeah, I guess I do need help from people after all, and later on in this journey, Naveen has been, like, the most helpful to me. I mean, of course, you have Lewis and Ray to help her out, but it's Naveen who ends up pushing himself forward to help Tiana, because Naveen knows what Tiana really wants. And later on, when he realizes that he wants to accomplish something, he realizes what he wants to accomplish is so he can make Tiana love him and see, I want to do this for you because it's what you want, it's not what I want. That just becomes one of the most romantic things in a modern Disney film in a while. And I'm kind of happy and kind of sad at the same time that Princess and the Frog was the last 2D animated film before Disney decided to go all 3D in the 2010s. Because this movie was so beautifully animated, and I'm not talking about just the backgrounds, I'm also talking about, like, character development and body language, because how Naveen and Tiana react around each other, especially towards, like, the second half, towards the end of the film, they're just so adorable and perfect. Like, you can tell what these two are thinking when they're around each other. Their cockiness, their suaveness, their surprise, their happiness, their sorrows, their, like, the emotions are all there. And that's why I think, especially towards the end of the movie, these two are definitely in the top 5 of most romantic Disney couples ever. Milo and Keita from Atlantis, The Lost Empire. I talked about body language when it came to Tiana and Naveen, but I think these two definitely master how body language affects how these two react around one another. So you have Milo, whose only goal is to find the city of Atlantis just so he can basically prove to everyone else, Atlantis does exist, I'm not going crazy, this is what my grandfather always told me. Basically, this is what I want to do. I want to avenge my grandfather because he died basically mocked. And then you have Keita, who's the princess of Atlantis, and all she wants is to make sure her people manage to live, because as she says in the movie, her kingdom is suffering. Her people are going to end up dying if they don't do something, but it's kind of hard as to why, until we find out it ends up with their crystals, which only Keita seems to know about, while all her other people are pretty much clueless. So of course Keita wants Milo's help, because Milo's basically the expert on the Atlantean language, the Atlantean culture of sorts, because of what his grandfather told him, and of course when he starts researching the journal that Milo got from a friend of his grandfather's. Like, he has all the information. Keita doesn't. So Keita originally wanted to use Milo for her own benefit. But of course, because these two are so passionate about learning about this culture, even though Milo's more interested in basically how the culture inside the city worked and basically what made Atlantis so mysterious, Keita just wanted to know, like, how can I get my past back and how we can drive our city to the future. Like how Tarzan and Jane worked, it's these two's curiosities that definitely binded them together at first, and of course, when danger approaches, these two get really defensive of each other. Like, if anyone's gonna hurt Milo, Keita reacts. And then, of course, when Keita ends up getting kidnapped in order for money purposes, Milo is gonna do everything he could to not only rescue Keita, but to rescue the city that she loves dearly. Because Milo basically, in order to keep the knowledge of Atlantis alive, the city has to be alive. But I think the coup de grace of the relationship making a staple, like a true legit type of relationship, especially when you see them together at the end, is that when Milo finally saves Keita, when she realizes that she's going to be alive at the end of the day, they don't kiss. She gives him a hug. A hug of, I can't believe I'm alive and I can't believe you're here. Like, if you'd watch the scene for yourself, it's definitely a lot more powerful with a hug than if she were to kiss him right then and there. And that about movie making, or animation in itself, to have, you know they're drawings, but you can tell they're emotional human beings in animated form, and that's what tugs at your heartstrings, and that's what definitely tugged at my heartstrings, especially since they got along so very well and so very quickly when Keita finds out that Milo did all the saving for her. Like, he used all the knowledge that he had and what he gained just so he could protect her and the people she loved. That's just super duper powerful in a movie, and I can't believe that Atlantis doesn't even have a lot of recognition now, especially since the movie came out in like 2001, 2002. Like, this movie needs a lot more recognition because it did a lot of things right. And I hope all of you can go watch it after watching this because I am super duper passionate about this film and about this couple as well. Belle and Beast from Beauty and the Beast. How could I not have these two on here? Beauty and Beast, or Belle and Beast, are basically the model couple of what a Disney prince and Disney princess couple should be. I mean, of course you have Cinderella, but in the modern age, Beauty and the Beast is most likely one of the first Disney princess films that people my age or younger are going to watch. And the relationship between Belle and Beast is definitely one of the most romantic couples that people are going to remember. So, to get one thing out of the way, if you have not watched Nostalgia Chicks talk about whether Beauty and the Beast is a movie about Stockholm Syndrome, oh boy, are you mistaken. Because, for one thing, Belle is way too strong of a character to be suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. And Beast is not the type of person who wanted to cause Stockholm Syndrome either. Like, if anything, he's more tame of a person who is holding Belle as a captive in comparison to other tragic kidnapping stories that we've heard on the news. So basically, Belle arrives at Beast Castle because she finds out that her father has been trapped there. And of course, she offers herself to take her father's place because she knows her father's older and he would not be able to survive in there. So she'd rather endure the suffering of being a prisoner in there instead of her older father. And that's the thing. Stockholm Syndrome would consider falling in love with your kidnapper when you're taken in by force and you're basically hypnotized to trust this one person who's basically treating you like crap. No, Belle decided to do this. She wasn't kidnapped, technically speaking. She offered herself to take her father's place. Secondly, she does end up trying to escape because she ends up breaking one of the Beast rules, which was entering the West Wing. But as she escapes, instead of letting her die, Beast ends up saving her life. He ends up saving her life and ends up injured in the process. And of course, to repay him, Belle ends up taking him back to the castle and heals his wounds. And of course, the banter that goes on with the tending of the wounds scene is just hilarious because, yeah, Belle did end up going into the West Wing and running off. She basically rebuttals with, well, maybe you should control your temper, which, I mean, she's not wrong, and usually the kidnappee does not yell back at the kidnapper without punishment, but he doesn't even punish her. He's like, okay, you have a point. like I said, Belle's like one of the strongest female characters to ever be made in film ever. So, like, nothing gets past Belle without her say. And not even Beast could even get past her without her say. And of course, the events after that, Beast tries his best to make her as comfy as possible because she did tend his wounds. Like, he saved her life, but then she also saved his by healing what the wolves had done to him. So, of course, and he has to repay her in return by, he gives her a library, for God's sake. He knew the one thing that she loved was books. Like, Belle loves to read as much as I do. I think that's where I get my reading from. So, gift her a whole library. Like, he had a ton of books in that library he was not going to read anyway, so why not give them to the person who loves books just as much as, or less than he does? Or more than he does, I should say. Like, he gives her a library! A library! Like, I want someone to give me a library! So, of course, the events from then on out, these two do learn that there are good sides to each other. Yes, like Tiana and Naveen, they hate each other at the beginning because Belle thought the Beast was just a nasty type of person, but then, of course, she learns later on that, no, he's fully not, and Beast wants to learn how to be a more proper gentleman because, like I said, he wants to pay back Belle for the kindness that she gave him. So, of course, he learns how to be a proper gentleman. Like I said, he gives her a library. He learns how to have fun. He reads with her. He throws her a ball. Like, he gives her the best dresses. He offers her the best food. He does everything to make sure that Belle is happy. And then the top layer of this whole cake was that when he discovers that through the mirror that Belle's father is in trouble, instead of being selfish of keeping Belle there because he knows that it'll break the curse when she eventually will confess her love to him, he lets her go be with her father because that he knew that was what Belle always wanted, even more than the library. Belle just wanted to be with her father, and of course, his selfless act ends up serving him well at the end. Because when Gaston comes to attack, he only attacks when Belle returns, and he knows that Belle is going to end up in danger if she leaves with Gaston. And Beast was gonna do. And Beast is gonna do whatever he can to save Belle because he loves her that much. And he had never felt that type of love before. So I can only imagine what's going in his mind when he meets a woman about his age for the first time. Like, he's very awkward, like he doesn't know what to do. And of course, with his anger issues, that he's not going to be like the nicest person, even though that was probably not his intentions, but he can't control it. But of course, later on, he learns how to. And because of the sake of this woman. Like, he is the coup de grace of heroes. Like, he's one of those Disney princes, or the first one, I think, ever, who's let his guard down about his insecurities to anyone. And of course, in movies before, like Snow White, Cinderella, what's another one? Yeah, Sleeping Beauty. We don't know that much about the prince, except for that he's handsome, brave, strong, goes to look for the princess, and they end up falling in love. Beauty and the Beast is one of the first times we've ever seen a prince so insecure, but then learning to overcome that because we see through character development how much a person can change another person just because of acts of kindness that he probably never got in his life before, or he hadn't learned about it. But then, of course, with Belle also, she is such a giving and accepting person in general, that there's no bad bone in her body. Like, she doesn't do anything out of vengeance. Like, she could have treated the Beast poorly because of how poorly he treated her father, but she doesn't, because she knows that's not going to get her anywhere. She just gets anywhere by staying independent, like defending herself when she knows that something is not right, and of course just being kind to others. And that tells the Beast that, oh, okay, she's not gonna completely hold grudges against me. And these two just don't hold grudges to each other at all. The second movie and then like the second sequel kind of ruined that, because I'm like, we don't need in-betweens. We really don't need in-betweens of what happened. Like, these two, we see these two, like, it's not love at first sight with these two, but we do see their relationship grow through character development and body language. And that works more than having, like, in-between sequels of Beast still being a bossy asshole. Because that's just unnatural at that point. Especially when, after Belle took him back to the castle and healed his wounds, those in-between scenes don't make any sense anymore. But disregarding that, these two are just, like I said, I would completely be amiss if I did not include these two in the top 5, like I've done with Naveen and Tiana and Milo and Keita. Like, these two had to be really high on the list, because this is a couple that is one of the most well-known, not only in the Disney industry, but the film industry as a whole. Rapunzel and Flynn from Tangled. I've looked over every single Disney movie there was. And when it comes to the modern Disney films, there are not many couples to begin with, because I think Disney's trying to strive away from, oh, if there's a guy and a girl pairing, even if they're friends, they're bound to get together at the end. Yeah, Disney's really trying to strive away from that, because it kind of doesn't make any sense now. However, when it comes to like the best modern, and I mean modern like based on like present backing to probably the beginning of this decade, Rapunzel and Flynn take the cake. Like, these two definitely build their relationship from, I would say, even Lady and the Tramp's roots. Even though their relationship didn't really start on a Lady and the Tramp basis, like something telling about something being bad happening and leaving, the two do end up first paired up based on like a deal circumstance. Like, Rapunzel had an idea that Flynn was not the type of guy that she's supposed to be associating with, but she was like, look, if you can do something for me, I will make sure that the guards don't capture you, because you've done something nice for me. For an 18-year-old who was trapped in a tower for basically all her life, Rapunzel's pretty smart. Like, you see her reading, and then you see her, like, doing all these different things. Even though she doesn't know much about the outside world, she knows how social logic, in a way, works. And that's how she manages to get Flynn around her little pinky. Flynn is kind of annoyed about her at first, because basically he tried to get away from the guards in the first place. That's why he discovered the tower, because he thought it was a nice place. Like, he had no idea what Rapunzel's circumstances even were in the first place. Like, I don't think he even knew about, he didn't even know about, like, the abusive parent issues until the third act. Like, he had absolutely no idea, but towards the third act at that point, he didn't even care. Because by the third act, he cares about Rapunzel's well-being so much, especially after finally seeing what her real happiness was during the I See the Light scene. Like, all Flynn cared about that point was just, okay, at this point, I finally understand what makes her tick. I finally understand what makes her be on her good side, and now that I've discovered what her good side was, why do I want her to suffer again? Especially after, technically, she helped him escape the guards so many times. Like, she's done her best to make sure that he does not get beaten up or dead, especially with the ruffian scene at the Ugly Duckling, or the Snuggly Duckling. Sorry. Like, she's defended him so many times, and especially for a 18-year-old who's never been in the outside world before, that's pretty extraordinary. So, of course, it's natural that Flynn Rider would want to save Rapunzel in return. And, oh my god. I think y'all know what I'm talking about when I was talking about, like, almost the end of the film, when Rapunzel saves his life for the last time, because, oh my god, when that scene first happened, I legit thought it was gonna go a different direction, and I was crying like a little bitch. Like, I was like, no, Rapunzel, why did this have to happen? Like, you guys were finally getting along. But then a happy ending does come, and the two do end up getting together, despite their age difference, because Rapunzel's 18, and Flynn looks like he's 10 years older. But no one cares, because the two are so adorable. Like, they learn each other's backstories a little bit, and they learn how to sympathize and empathize with their situations, and they learn that they're not bad people. They've just been in bad circumstances, and that bad circumstances force them to do things that they didn't want to do. And they've come to understand that. Oh my god, these two, like, completely understand each other so much, and I didn't see the entire Tangled TV series yet, but I've seen some clips, and oh my god, these two are also adorable in the TV show. From what I've seen so far, I hope I can watch the TV show somewhere, because I really want to see more of Flynn and Rapunzel's adorableness.
And now, it's time for honorable mentions.
I promise I did not put this couple at the top out of bias. I did this because there are so many reasons why these two characters work, even with their completely different circumstances. These two have become a definite couple staple for the Disney company. These two have become so famous in Disney in general that their love story is still remembered to this very day. They're one of the first couples that people think of when they think of Disney couples ever, because these two were just so meant to be.
Aladdin and Jasmine from the entire Aladdin franchise.
I love this movie so much. So you have Aladdin, who is broke. He basically has to steal in order to survive. And all he wanted out of life was to be a respected member of society. And of course, in the Arabian society, money is the only way that you can get any amount of respect. And of course, in Agrabah, that's how it works, because when you're an orphan and dirt broke, you get treated like you're mud in the street. And that's how Aladdin got treated for the majority of his life. Then you have Jasmine, who's Agrabah's princess, the daughter of the Sultan. And of course, her problem is, because of the laws that have been set in, not in stone, but set for Agrabah royal society, by her next birthday, she's supposed to be married. Like, she's supposed to get married to a prince, because that's how the kingdom's going to go on, because the Sultan only has one daughter, and usually in Arabian society, like, the son gets everything. So, in the Sultan's mind, if they can combine two kingdoms together, Jasmine will be satisfied for the rest of her life. But that's the problem. Jasmine is not satisfied, because she's had a lot of suitors come in, but none of them take any regard for Jasmine as a human being. They just treat her like she's a piece of property and that they're going to get her kingdom if everything works out. But Jasmine is too independent for that. Like, she's basically gained her father's stubbornness for, if my father and my people should get respect, how come I can't? And of course, rather than being sold off to marriage, she tries running away. And of course, through some struggle in the streets, because she's never been out on the street before, she even said she'd never been on the other side of the palace walls, Aladdin comes in to save her because he's been on the street all of his life. He knows how the streets work. And the two is, I know it's a first sight romance, and I usually don't go for this, but this first sight romance is different, almost like in a Little Mermaid sort of way, because the two meet by Aladdin saving her, and they tell each other about their problems, even though Jasmine right away doesn't tell him that she's the princess just yet. She just tells him that my father's forcing me to get married, though I don't want to. And Aladdin's like, oh yeah, that sucks. And you can tell in his eyes, he's like, I'm falling for you. So yeah, the fact that your father's forcing you to get married, yeah, that sucks. And even for Aladdin at that point, even if he tried to be the husband of an arranged marriage, he can't, because like I said, he's poor. He doesn't have much to give. Like, if someone's gonna send their daughter off, they can't send their daughter off to someone who has nothing. So chances for Aladdin to get married to somebody are basically second to none. But then, of course, they get separated because the Vizier Jafar has something to do with it, and Jafar wants Aladdin for his own schemes, and Jasmine ends up thinking that Aladdin's dead because Jafar claims that the princess was kidnapped in order to get this scheme on the way. I don't know, it's something complicated. But because Aladdin ends up finding the genie, and the genie's gonna help him out, all that Aladdin can think of right now is not solely on riches. Like, what Aladdin wanted more than riches at that point was for Jasmine to finally notice him. Like, ever since they met in the street that day, Aladdin could not stop thinking about Jasmine. Like, he talks about how beautiful she is. He talks about how witty and smart she was. But, of course, the only way that he could get to talk to her again is if he disguised himself as the prince, because it's the Agrabah law. And of course, Genie helps him turn into a prince and manages to sneak him inside the palace because of this alter ego. But of course, when Aladdin gets inside, he comes to understand that Jasmine really hates this life. Like, when Aladdin is trying to pose as a suitor, like every other suitor, he realizes that makes Jasmine hate him even more. Because she's sick and tired of the suitor parade. So, midway through Aladdin's princely ego phase, he has to change his motivation of impressing Jasmine from, okay, I'm not going to dish out what I have to impress you. I'm going to impress you by the one thing I know you want more. It's to be outside the palace walls like the first day we met. And of course, in this alter ego, Jasmine doesn't know that Prince Ali is Aladdin yet. So, of course, when she goes out with Aladdin on the magic carpet, it's the best time of her life, or the second best time of her life, since being outside of the palace and being with a person that wants to get to know her for her, not because of her father's money. Jafar reveals that Prince Ali is Aladdin through Jafar stealing the lamp from Aladdin and taking control of the palace for himself. Jasmine's reaction was kind of what I expected. Like, when she realizes that this prince was the person that she thought was dead, she's completely shocked. She's not disappointed. She's very, very shocked. And of course, when Aladdin manages to come back and to save her, towards the end of the movie, Aladdin does say, I'm sorry I lied to you, and because with this form, I can't be with you, it's the law. And then, of course, that's when Jasmine says, this is why it's not fair, because I love you and you did all of this for me. Like, how can we not be together at this point? And, of course, Aladdin still had his last wish, but he decides not to use it on being a prince. He keeps his promise to Genie and to release him. But, of course, it's that decision that made the Sultan see that Aladdin may not be the richest person. He might probably be the poorest person of Agrabah, but he definitely has the heart of what every prince should have. And that's what should matter most to him, because he's going to give his daughter to a person who's going to love her more than anything. And you can tell throughout the whole film, Aladdin loves Jasmine more than anything else in the world. And by the time that they get married, like, it's not just the first movie that you see them, like, you see Aladdin, like, do things because of Jasmine. You see it in the second film. You see it in the TV series. You see it in the third movie, which is my favorite sequel, by the way, because that's the only sequel that works. You see that he does everything for Jasmine, and I don't want to spoil, like, the second sequel, but I really want to talk about the third movie, because that's the coup de grace of how Aladdin differs from all the other princes that, or male leads that you've seen with their females leads, or interests, I should say. When Aladdin helps his father escape from prison, like, his father wants Aladdin to join him, because at this point, he just released a criminal, and, yeah, that's not gonna look good on Aladdin's part. But instead of Aladdin running away, he says, no, just because you abandoned me after all these years does not mean I'm going to abandon the woman that I love more than anything. And we're gonna get married, like, somehow or another. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm gonna turn myself in or not. I'm not abandoning Jasmine. Like, I love her more than anything else. Like, his love that he should have for his father basically blended in for double or triple the love for Jasmine. Because he could hate his father for all he cared. But no, he did not want to abandon the woman that he rescued 1,000,000 times. Because he wanted to be with her. Like, that has not changed. Aladdin is still Aladdin. He always stuck to himself, and he always put those above him. Like, it didn't matter which person that he, like, engaged with. He cared about other people, and he especially cared about the person he loved. And that was Jasmine. And, of course, she did things for him, too. Like, she saved him a couple times in the TV series and the movies. Like, these two have done everything for each other because they loved each other. That's what love is. Like, that you want to be with your person, and no matter what their backstory is, that's not going to affect the person that they are on the inside. And that's, of course, what Genie even proves to the Sultan back in the first movie, is that, look, Aladdin did this selfless thing in freeing me, a person that he only knew for, like, half a day, or, like, only, like, a day or two. But he let me go. He let me go as if I was his best friend. And that's the selfless person that Aladdin is. He learned from being selfish to selfless. And that's what changed the whole entire thing of Aladdin's life. And he learned that the more he gave, the more he was going to get in return. That is pretty much it for this video. I hope you really liked it. And if you did, don't forget to give this video a like. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. You can check out my other content on this channel. I do a lot more than just talk about movie stuff and Disney stuff, in case you haven't noticed already. I'm Cait, and it's been real. Ciao!